But you're being too
one second.
You would have to claim that.
Individuals don't matter.
You'd have to claim
no,
that.
go ahead and respond. Go ahead.
And I agree with my brother's
Scott.
comments. Brother Scott, he brought up the Civil Rights Bill. But what he did not talk about in relation to the Civil Rights Bill is there were two words included in that bill that ultimately served to take away from black people what that bill was intended to deliver. They added gender and they added sexual orientation. And as a result of that, white women and homosexuals have been able to strip black America from the intended gains of the Civil Rights Act. So there was still racism in that bill if you will study that history.
So Umar, your question was, has anyone black ever systematically done, has anyone white ever systematically done anything?
Systematically. White America.
So LBJ would be the answer for that,
no,
because that's the government.
No, I don't think you heard the question.
That's a systematic move.
No, you didn't hear the question.
No,
you did not. No, you didn't.
Yeah,
you're so quick to defend white folks that you're not listening.
No, I'm not trying to defend white folks.
45 seconds. All African American men who have
done some good things.
No, who have married white women. But you said any black man who marries a white woman will not get your respect.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
And what I'm telling you is this: I don't care who you name. I don't care how much work you did for black people. Your greatest commitment to black people is being committed to a black woman. It is still a contradiction. No matter how much you think you did for the struggle, if you really were concerned with black people, you would have committed yourself to a black woman. So it doesn't matter how successful they are. It doesn't matter how great you may claim them to be. At the end of the day, you didn't think enough about your own people to marry a woman who looks like you.
Frederick Douglass.
Yes, sir. An ancestor of mine.
So when you say ancestor, what does that mean?
Let me break it down.
Because, again, some have said you tried to claim that you are a descendant of Frederick Douglass.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Africans. I hope you're doing fine where you are, and if you ain't doing fine, please do fine where you are. It's good to be fine. Yeah. We talk a lot about slavery in this channel because it is the chief problem of the issues black people are facing in the United States of America today. And one such figure that stood up and really helped to bring an end to the slave trade was Frederick Douglass. I believe the name Frederick Douglass should ring a bell in the minds of all, if not so many of the African Americans, you know. So Frederick Douglass is a man who is known for many things. One of the things he's known for is being a civil rights activist. You know, Douglass is often called the father of the civil rights movement. He was a prominent abolitionist, he was an orator, and he was also an advocate for human and women rights. This guy, Frederick Douglass, was also an author. You know, Frederick Douglass wrote 3 autobiographies, including the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. He also wrote An American Slave, 1845, and Life and Times of Frederick Douglass in 1881. So he's written 3 books which are his own autobiographies, you know. He was also an Underground Railroad worker. Douglass and his wife helped at least 400 runaway slaves through their work with the Underground Railroad. This is the part that I love most about Frederick Douglass, you know. He also made some speeches. Douglass delivered the famous speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July." I don't know what that means, but we are yet to find out in a video that we want to have, and then I will give a commentary on it. He was also a first African-American vice presidential nominee. He was also self-taught. Douglass was forbidden from learning to read, but he taught himself. You know how oppressive the slavery regime was. Don't learn, don't read, don't study, because they think that if you learn, read, and study, you'll become a competition. And the white slave master was not a man who wanted that to happen. He knew that the Africans would get enlightened. But despite all this, Frederick Douglass found himself a way to teach himself. You know, he became enlightened without the Western education. We don't need Western education to become enlightened. You know, abolitionists, people who were in support of Frederick Douglass, bought him a ticket so that he would go back to the United States of America without being re-enslaved. You know, he escaped slavery and he went all the way to Europe. No wonder he was against this slavery thing. There's a video that Dr. Umar Johnson and Roland Martin made. There was an interview that Umar Johnson was invited, and he's spilling a lot of information I believe can be helpful in understanding this character of Frederick Douglass. I believe we should watch this video, and then by the end of the video, of course, I shall share with you my thoughts, where we shall also have a deep critical analysis. Let's dive in.
It's because my narrative is a whole lot different from the average mainstream black scholar. I don't parrot the narrative that the American social order wants black scholars to parrot. I tell the truth. I don't scratch unless I itch, and I don't dance unless I like the music. And because they're not used to having someone with a traditional education posit non-traditional views, people will automatically start to question his credentials. How did he get this far believing what he believes in? Well, you have to play the spook who sat by the door. When I got accepted into those 3 universities, they didn't know what I believed in. They didn't know what I stood for. But as time went on, it revealed itself. But I'm unapologetically African, so I'm not really concerned with what people think about me personally. I have a job to do, and that is to awaken the sleeping consciousness of African people, not just in America, but all across the world.
One of the things that you said during the interview, you said that Mandarin was one of the official languages in South Africa.
Yes, sir.
And others said you were dead wrong.
Yes, because I didn't clarify that I was speaking of it being an official language in the public school system of South Africa. So I should have clarified that Mandarin is an official language in the Republic of South Africa's school system. It's not an official language in the country, it's an official language in the school system. And I was speaking of schools, but I didn't clarify that, so that's my responsibility.
Also, during that particular interview, you talked about a variety of issues that also got people talking. One of them dealt with your views on interracial marriage.
Yes, sir.
And so, so explain that for folks who did not hear it.
Certainly. Simply put, any black man who is with a woman who's not an African herself is going to have a difficult time getting respect from me. I believe black men need to be with black women. The black family is under attack. Only 1 out of every 4 black women gets married. The black woman is last likely to get married. She's the last married, the first divorced. We have what? 2/3 of our children being raised by working class and impoverished single black female-led house homes. The destruction of a nation begins in the home of its families. And if we want to save black people, we have to save the black family. And in order to do that, black men have to commit themselves to black women.
So when you talk about not getting your respect, so if that's the case, you're saying President Barack Obama didn't get your respect because his dad married a white woman?
Oh, not at all.
Would Harry Belafonte?
Not at all. I want to be very clear about something. As Pan-Africanists, the product of an interracial union is an African. I have heroes who are biracial. Some of the grandfathers of Pan-Africanism were of mixed racial ancestry. You don't blame a child for how they got here.
But I'm asking you this here. Harry Belafonte has a white wife. No respect for him?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your social status.
So no. I didn't say social. I'm talking about the one who put the work in.
Right, but you put him out.
No. I'm asking you. So Harry Belafonte.
Yes, sir.
Sidney Poitier, Julian Bond, Vernon Jordan.
And you're naming all them to say what?
No, these are.
Okay, so let's deal with that.
So hold on 1 second. Here's a statement from the family. Let me go ahead and read this, please. The family of Frederick Douglass has received numerous inquiries about Umar Johnson questioning his relationship to Frederick Douglass. There have also been questions about his legitimacy of his PhD and the handling of the donations he's received for his school that he is promoting. We can tell you with 100% certainty that he is not a descendant of Frederick Douglass. With that being said, Mr. Johnson is very careful not to bill himself as a descendant, but he doesn't correct people when they refer to him in this way. He calls himself a blood relative, which is a nebulous reference designed to make people think he is a descendant. We have researched his explanation of being a blood relative to the great abolitionist. Some of the information he provides is accurate, but an extremely important piece of his explanation with regards to a documented relative of Frederick Douglass is false. The information he recites correctly is from the public record, so his knowledge of our family ancestry is far from definitive proof.
2 things there. 1, he's not a descendant of Frederick Douglass, okay? I would concur with that, all right? But then 2, you also heard that some of the things he says is correct. So the question becomes, he's either related or he's not, okay?
So are you related?
I'm about to answer your question, if you allow me to do that. I am a blood relative of Frederick Douglass. My name is on the family tree. We have a family reunion every 2 years. What they're talking about, and I want to make sure you're clear, they're talking about whether or not I come through the loin of Frederick Douglass, which I do not, nor have I ever claimed, okay? I have more videos on YouTube than any other scholar. I speak around the world more than any other scholar. Show me where I've ever said I was a descendant. I've only claimed one thing, kinsman. How am I kinsman? If you ever read any of the autobiographies of Frederick Douglass, he talks about growing up on Tuckahoe Creek with Cousin Stephen. Cousin Stephen is Stephen Bailey, Dr. Umar Johnson's 4 times great-grandfather, whose grave I just visited last week. I go every year. Okay, that's my 4 times great-grandfather. He married my 4 times great-grandmother, Caroline Wilson Bailey. From that union came my 3 times great-grandfather, George Washington Bailey, the first black public school teacher on Eastern Shore, Maryland. He married Grandmom Annie. They had Grandmom Caroline. Okay, she had Grandma Vivian. Grandma Vivian married a Spanish-speaking Cuban immigrant, Grandpop Cicero. They had Grandmom Ida, who's still alive, who married James Johnson, who had my father Jamal, who married my mama Barbara, and from that union I was born. I am a blood of Bailey. I am not married in. What they're talking about is strictly descendancy, something I've never claimed. Am I a kin? Do I directly come from the loin of the first cousin and potentially half-brother of Frederick Douglass? And the reason I say potentially, the slave master who owned our family, a white man named Aaron Anthony, raped Frederick's mother and raped Stephen's mother, my ancestor. And there's significant evidence to suggest that. Some people could still argue, though, that they were not brothers because it's not conclusive. Fine, throw that out. I'm still a kinsman because I come through the blood of his first cousin.
You talked about, again, respect. Do you respect?
I don't talk about respect. I get tremendous respect from my people.
I'm not talking about that. Do you respect Frederick Douglass?
Yes.
But he had a white wife.
He did.
So that's what I'm
I'm gonna clarify.
Why is that an issue? Why is that? If you put in the work and you have the history, who cares who you marry?
I already answered that question, and I told you I don't care how much work you put in. If you don't commit yourself to a black woman, ultimately you wasn't totally committed to the struggle.
Even Frederick Douglass.
Even Frederick Douglass has to be criticized, as I did on the Breakfast Club. Now it has to be put in context. He didn't marry the white woman until he was an old man. After his wife Anna Murray Douglass of 50 years, a blue-black chocolate woman through whom all my cousins were born. He was an old man when he did it, but nonetheless he did it. And yes, he has to be criticized on that because a black man needs to be with a black woman, and it is a contradiction. I don't care how much work you think you've done for black folks to not commit yourself to a black woman.
Hold tight 1 second. I got more questions when we come back.
I would argue the reason black men marry white women is because they wish they were white themselves. And having the white man's prize, his queen, is a psychological symbol to myself that I am equal to him.
We're back with Dr. Umar Johnson. In that particular statement, the family also addressed this here. You talked about taking over the buildings or the land of a black school that was shut down.
Yes, sir.
HBCU
St. Paul's College.
And you were raising money for it. First of all, how much money has been raised, and what's the status of that project?
Well, St. Paul's has been sold. Approximately 3 to 5 months ago, I was told by the auction company in charge of the sale that it was been sold to a developer.
So how much money was raised? What the people gave? All kinds of people gave. How much was raised, and what's the status of that money?
$700,000, and the status is we're still looking for a school, and the status is my start date for FDMG will be 8/21/18, or if at all, it may be delayed to 8/21/19, which is the anniversary of the Nat Turner War.
When you say looking for a school, why not start a charter school? I mean, you can start a school.
Because charter schools are owned by the state, and I'm a Pan-Africanist. I believe what is to be done for black people must be done by black people. Why do I want a charter school?
So you want a private school?
Exactly. Independent school.
Lauren.
So the question of interracial marriage, I
Yes,
mean,
ma'am.
come on, man. You're too smart for this. We got 43.
I'm too smart for what?
We got 43 million black people in this country.
And
We
that
got
means
over
what?
190 million white people. You're going to sit here and say that if
And you
a
got
black
half the
person
black
and a white person get married, a black person and a white person get married, one can't understand the other person's struggle. You've seen
It's not
you've
about
seen Tim Wise, right?
individualism.
You've seen
It's
Reverend
about
Wallace. You've
systematic
seen white people who
empowerment.
understand racism very well.
That doesn't mean they're going to do anything about
The other thing
it.
that is obviously
Well,
true is they understand racism when you see things Like the murder of Medgar Evers, like the murder of
And?
Martin Luther King. They understand racism
And
just
what
fine.
did they do about it?
They understand us gaining just fine, and that's why murder happened.
Based on
right?
what?
So the idea that somehow a white person can't understand our struggle,
I
no
could
way.
care less what they understand. I'm
No
asking
way.
you, what have they done systematically
He already
to
told
improve
you that.
the opportunities
He
of white
already
folks?
told you
He
that.
did not tell
Oh,
me
yes,
that.
you did tell
He
tell
did
you
not
that.
tell me that.
You're going to tell me that guys like Tim Wise and Reverend Wallace don't understand
What about
race in
Tim
America?
Wise?
They don't understand race
He
in America?
articulates
They don't
racism,
so
but
all-
what has he done to
There are no white
systematically
people that understand race in
eliminate it?
America.
There's not
no
a
white
white
people.
person
There's
in
no
America.
white people that understand race in America.
There's not a white person.
Them going to Eugene.
There's not a white person in America who has ever worked to systematically eliminate the white privilege that they benefit from vis-a-vis your oppression.
You are lying.
You know
Eugene,
190
So-
million
so-
people in America.
Eugene.
And
So,
you're a
so,
coon.
we're not going to go there. We're not. I haven't.
Called me a liar, and you're a coon.
Well, it's a fact that
Watch
you're
how
lying.
you talk
It's
to
a
me,
fact
I'ma
that
watch
you're
how I
lying.
talk
It's
to
a
you.
fact that you're
I
lying.
understand you
To
want
say
white
that.
people.
No, wait,
To say that.
hold on,
To
hold
say
on,
that.
hold on,
To say that.
No, everybody, 1 second. Several things I don't allow. I don't allow the N-word. I don't allow coon. We can talk to one another and disagree, but I do not use racial epithets against
And
black
that's
people.
fine, but he called me a liar.
No.
So the language needs to be watched on both
Racial
sides.
epithets will not be used on this show
And that's fine.
by anybody.
But how we talk to each
but
other needs
you
to
can
be
say
up
whatever you want, but no racial epithets will be used on this show about black people to black people. Eugene, your question.
So, from your paradigm, from your perspective, Civil Rights Act isn't an act of white folk stepping up on behalf of black folk. Current criminal justice reform legislation moving isn't a current act of white folk stepping up on behalf of black folk. Folk that funded the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s isn't an act of white folks stepping up and having black folk. I'm sorry, as an American, because I define myself as an American,
sure you
an
do.
African American.
I'm sure you do.
I live in a country that moves forward together. And I say that as a Republican. We move forward together. Yes, we have individual struggle. Yes, we have struggles.
I'm not talking
yes, we
about
have. Yes, no. Yes, we
We're
have.
talking
we
about
have
systematic,
we have
bias,
systematic. We have
disproportionality.
We have-
Finish
Indiscriminate.
it. Finish it. 15 seconds. Then answer.
we have systematic struggles, and together as a country, moving forward to defeat those struggles.
Really? So, based on what you said, I want you to give me examples of white folk, not individuals, but systematically.
individuals?
Excuse me.
Why can't they be
excuse
individuals?
me.
1 second.
I know you can't wait to
1 second
offend them,
answer.
but let me
1
finish.
second answer.
Can I finish?
Go.
Okay, I'm going. Okay? You cannot name anything systematically done ever in this country by white people to equal the playing field for black folks.
The Civil Rights Act,
Johnson?
Congress
Lyndon
literally
Johnson?
sits behind us. The Civil Rights Act, the
Are
Voting
you
Rights
aware?
Act.
Lyndon
Are you
Johnson?
Both of
aware?
them.
Are
Lyndon
you
Johnson?
aware?
Hey, can I?
Both of them.
White people
Second.
are proud of you, son.
Let me ask
Scott Bolden.
quick. I think the terminology and the narrative being used is a little misleading, not from you, but from this dialogue right here.
Okay.
You know, it's one thing to sympathize with the struggle. It's another one to empathize with the struggle. Very different. When you talk about marriage being a political choice, and that one of the arguments that you made that I tend to agree with is that if you don't marry a black woman, then she can never support and comfort and value your day-to-day struggle as a black man. That being said, I do think that the level of the rhetoric that you use in regard to your Pan-Africanism is difficult for many of us, quote, in the mainstream to get our arms around. But this issue about black men and white women in the civil rights struggle is not a new discussion. My mother was a civil rights activist in Chicago, and she would often complain privately that, one, you can't sleep white and talk black, if you will. And that's always been in the American struggle, African-American struggle with ourselves.
Yes, sir.
The other thing is that we struggle with our own psychology about self-love and otherwise. And if we get our arms around that, that does make sense.
Okay.
But you would have to say that you know 190 million people.
But you're being too
One second.
You would have to
dictatorial.
claim
Answer,
that.
one
Individuals
second.
don't
Answer the
matter.
question.
You'd have to claim
No,
that.
go ahead and respond. Go ahead.
And I agree with my brother's
Scott.
comments. Brother Scott, he brought up the Civil Rights Bill. But what he did not talk about in relation to the Civil Rights Bill is there were two words included in that bill that ultimately served to take away from black people what that bill was intended to deliver. They added gender and they added sexual orientation. And as a result of that, white women and homosexuals have been able to strip black America from the intended gains of the Civil Rights Act. So there was still racism in that bill if you will study that history.
So Umar, your question was, has anyone black ever systematically done? I mean, has anyone white ever systematically
Not
done anything thing.
Systematically white America.
So LBJ would be the answer for that.
No,
because that's the government.
No, I don't think you heard the question.
That's a systematic move.
No, you didn't hear the question. No, you did not. No, you didn't.
Yeah,
You're so quick to defend white folks that you're not listening.
No, I'm not trying to defend white folks.
45 seconds.
Now, after listening and learning about Frederick Douglass, here is something that I need us to pay keen attention to about this character, Frederick Douglass. As Dr. Umar Johnson said, he is the grandfather, the fourth grandfather of Umar Johnson, you know. That's such, no wonder Umar Johnson is like he is. He has the blood of an abolitionist. He has the blood of a traditionalist. He has the blood of Africanism in him. In his journey from enslaved young man to internationally known activist, Frederick Douglass, born in 1818 and died in 1895, has been a source of inspiration and hope for millions. His brilliant words have made actions continue to shape the way that we think about race, democracy, and the meaning of freedom. He became the most important leader of the movement of African-American civil rights in the 19th century. After escaping from slavery in Maryland, Douglass became a national leader of the abolitionist movement in Massachusetts and New York, during which he gained fame for his oratory and incisive anti-slavery writings. He wrote 3 autobiographies, as I told you before. He also actively supported women's suffrage, and he held several public offices. Without his knowledge or consent, he became the first African-American nominated for being a vice president of the United States of America, as he was running alongside Victoria Woodhull on the Equal Rights Party ticket, you know. Frederick Douglass is the father of civil rights movement in the United States of America. This man is a legend. He's a black American man who was once a slave, a man who escaped from prison, the prison of slavery. He became free and he came back to free his own people. Some people become free and they just run away. No, they just run away. They don't think about behind, you know, they just think of themselves. Now, the place of birth was Talbot County, Massachusetts district. The date of birth was February 1818. The place of death was Cedar Hall in Washington, D.C. The date of death was February 20th, 1895. The place of burial was Rochester, New York. The cemetery name was Mount Hope Cemetery. Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey was born into slavery on the eastern shore of Maryland in February 1819. Enslavers often ripped apart or fractured family relationships. At an early age, Frederick realized there was a connection between literacy and freedom. Not allowed to attend school, he taught himself to read and write in the streets of Baltimore. At 12, he bought a book called The Columbian Orator. It was a collection of revolutionary speeches, debates, and writing on natural rights. When Frederick was 15, his enslaver sent him back to the eastern shore to labor as a field hand. Frederick rebelled intensely. He educated other enslaved individuals, physically fought back against a slave breaker, and attempted to seize his freedom through a bold but ultimately unsuccessful plan. He was frustrated. His enslaver returned him to Baltimore. This time, Frederick met a young, free black woman named Anna Murray. Anna Murray used her money to buy him a train ticket, risking her own safety to help him seize his freedom. On September 3rd, 1838, with the ticket in his hand, he boarded a northbound train dressed as a sailor. In less than 24 hours, Frederick arrived in New York City. His lifelong search for freedom was well underway. This guy met a woman by his side and he helped him through all this by sacrificing the only ticket she had, you know. Now, what about this abolitionist movement? Because this is the part where we think he's really, really important. This is the part where we think Frederick Douglass made a very serious strides to the lives of black people in the United States of America. After seeking freedom, Frederick and Anna were married. They decided that with the human traffickers in New York City, it was not a safe place for Frederick So they settled in New Bedford, Massachusetts. There, they adopted the last name Douglas and started their family. The family grew to include 5 children, so Rosetta, Lewis, Frederick, Jr., Charles, and Annie. After finding employment as a laborer, Douglas began to attend abolitionist meetings and speak about his experiences as an orator, and was paid to speak about slavery by the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society. This took him on speaking tours across the North and the Midwest. Douglas' fame as an orator increased as he traveled. Still, some of his audiences suspected that he had never been enslaved. In 1845, he published his first autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, to lay those doubts to rest. The narrative gave a clear record of names and places from his enslavement. To avoid being captured and re-enslaved, Douglass traveled overseas for almost 2 years. He gave speeches and sold copies of his narrative in England, Ireland, and Scotland. When abolitionists offered to purchase his freedom, Douglass accepted and returned home to the United States of America legally free. The Douglass family relocated to Rochester, New York. In Rochester, Douglass took his work in new direction. He embraced the women's rights movement, helped people on the Underground Railroad, and supported anti-slavery political parties. In 1855, he published his second autobiography, My Bondage and My Freedom, which expanded on his first autobiography and challenged racial segregation in the North. There is a lot about Frederick Douglass. I can't seem to get hold of it. This man, I don't think this video will be enough to give him justice. So we'll have to cut short here. But let's remember the words of who? Let's remember the words of the guy, Umar Johnson, when he said, some people are just there to ensure that other people's lives are better, in as much as they pass through challenges, in as much as they face backlash even from their own people. Their life is never understood until the time they are long gone. It was between 1818 when he was born and 1895 when Frederick Douglass died that people came to realize his true worth, because the consequences of his action, the consequences of his care and his love for his own black people is now met today. He is the founder of the American Civil Rights Movement. Just imagine, when there was nothing, he created something. And you know, that time when you face challenges, that time when everything seemed not working for you, and that time when things are just not going your way. Remember, sometimes you are suffering so that you make it easier for others for others to follow you. You understand? You know, a friend of mine just shared with me yesterday. He called me and he told me, congrats, brother, for hitting 100,000 subscribers. I told him, yeah, thank you, bro. I really appreciate. He told me that, you know, you've opened ways for us, smaller channels. We will also get to 100K. At least somebody who is closer to us has hit that milestone. To some people, 100K is nothing because they have millions. To some people, it's so huge. Some people, they just don't care. But to those people who care, it's a thing to them, you know. The life of Frederick Douglass is likened to the life of Martin Luther King Jr. The life of Frederick Douglass is likened to the life of Malcolm X. The life of Frederick Douglass is likened to the life of Marcus Garvey. These people didn't live fully for their own. They lived for their people. It's like they were being propelled by something. During the time that they exist, we don't see them for who they are. It's always until someone dies that you realize, oh, we had someone and we didn't realize. Should we really wait for someone to die for us to realize their worth? That is an important question.